By the late 1990s in NASCAR, moves like this were becoming more and more common.
Look at this mess!
Yes, and the oh, man!
Drivers were running each other onto the apron, sometimes with disastrous consequences.
They're in the grass. Oh, here goes Skinner crosses one on his car. Yes, there goes the chip going to the wall.
By 2001, NASCAR decided that this has gone too far. Dale Earnhardt's death ushered in an unprecedented emphasis on safety, and the Subway 300 at Talladega was the straw that broke the camel's back. For the following day's Talladega 500, a new rule was implemented, one that would become perhaps the most controversial in the history of NASCAR.
Casey had to go down about half of a lane below the yellow line. Being a rookie, I'm not so sure that NASCAR wouldn't want to talk to him about that.
And they will, Darrell.
Black flag, that means go to the pits and find out what you did wrong.
Casey Atwood was the first driver to fall victim to the new rule. No driver may go below the yellow line to advance their position. In the years to come, this rule will affect the outcome of many superspeedway races, with scrutiny placed on NASCAR no matter which way the call went. Today, I'm going to attempt to do what may be impossible: make sense of the yellow line rule. What I'm going to do today is analyze several of the more high-profile yellow line moments and try to create an exact definition of the yellow line rule that's consistent with all of NASCAR's calls. Now, of course, that's easier said than done. The first big splash the yellow line rule made was at the 2001 Pepsi 400.
But it's going to be Dale Earnhardt Jr. using lessons learned from his father to go from 6th to 1st and score the victory in the Pepsi 400.
See that black flag? That's for Tony Stewart after he pulled this move on Johnny Benson with 5 laps to go.
And Tony Stewart gets going underneath the yellow line.
Now to me, that looks like Tony got forced below the line. Johnny's leaving him about a third of a car's width of room at best. If Tony stood his ground here, Johnny might have been featured in a previous video on this channel. This incident, despite what NASCAR might have said at the time, makes their original stance on the yellow line rule seem clear. It doesn't matter if you were forced below the line. If you pass down there, you're getting a penalty. Let's fast forward to 2003, where the definition of down there gets a little murky. When Dale Earnhardt Jr. makes this move with 5 laps to go in the Ernst 499, Larry McReynolds knows right away that he might be in trouble.
Comes Junior, he's got to run. Kenseth trying to close him off on the line. It's going to be borderline, guys. It's going to be borderline.
There are several routes NASCAR's decision can take here. Whether Dale Jr. was forced below the line or whether he was already ahead of Kenseth at the moment he crossed over, but Darrell Waltrip offers what might be the most important factor.
It would be very unpopular to black flag him.
2003 would end up being the first year that Dale Earnhardt Jr. won NASCAR's Most Popular Driver award. He will win it every season for the rest of his career. His impact on the sport is so great that many attribute at least part of NASCAR's decline in ratings in recent years to the simple fact that he isn't racing anymore. Whenever Dale Jr. would take the lead into superspeedway, the crowd would swell in a way that was unmatchable by any other fan base. 1 year from now, Jeff Gordon will beat Jr. after a controversial yellow flag call, and he'll be pelted with beer cans. If this call doesn't go Jr.'s way, I'd bet his fans would react similarly now. Coming into turn 3 in the final lap, we get our answer.
NASCAR has called Junior's pass a clean pass. This is for the win. Dale Earnhardt Jr., 4 straight wins at Talladega. NASCAR's review of the videotape showed in their eye that Dale Earnhardt Jr. was in the act of passing when he was forced below the yellow line. So the pass holds. Earnhardt's first to the checkered flag, and he goes to victory lane.
In the act of passing. One could argue that Tony Stewart was in the act of passing as Johnny Benson pushed him to the line, but I suppose he just wasn't far enough alongside Benson. To be fair, when Jr. dipped below the line, he was already inches away from being ahead of both Johnson and Kenseth. As far as judgment calls go, this one feels like a toss-up to me. In 2006, things get ridiculous. One prevailing exception to the yellow line rule has been wreck avoidance. If a crash is happening in front of you, you can go below the line to avoid getting collected, and NASCAR won't penalize you. This has almost always been NASCAR's stance. The almost comes from this moment in the 2006 Bud Shootout. It's lap 40. Kyle Busch and Jimmy Johnson get on the brakes to come to pit road. Now, this isn't a wreck. Nobody's spinning and nobody's making contact right now, but if Carl Edwards doesn't make a move right this second, it's going to become a big wreck. There's cars to his outside, so he can't make a right, and there's a car directly behind him, so he can't slam on the brakes. He only has one option.
Under him, they were telling him to wave everybody off, and then he tried to get around Tony Stewart, and we got everybody trying to pit and go around people.
Trying not to wreck. Carl Edwards, the 99 car, had no place to go. They all started slowing up in front of him and did a good job.
Despite losing positions overall, Carl is penalized for this. I'm going to be charitable again and assume that NASCAR ruled that this somehow was not wreck avoidance since a wreck hadn't started before he went down there. After looking at 3 incidents, here's our definition so far. No driver may go below the yellow line to advance their position. It doesn't matter if you're forced below the line. It also doesn't matter if you net lose positions on track, only if you pass cars below the line. This may not be the exact letter of the law, given what Mike Joyce said in 2003.
The question will be whether or not they deem he was forced down below the line.
But that's how NASCAR has enforced it. 2 years later, this enforcement is going to invite more scrutiny than ever before.
Tony Stewart has never won at Talladega in a NASCAR Sprint Cup car.
He's going to have to do a lot of blocking right here. They've got to run on him.
Tony Stewart, having been forced below the line 7 years earlier, does what he needs to do to win the race.
Got to run.
Here they come.
I can't go down there and do that, though.
Actually, I think it's legal on the last lap.
He might have got it right there.
I think it's legal on the last lap.
What Andy Petrie is probably referring to is this moment from 2007, where Johnny Benson passed Travis Kvapil for what ended up being second place. This comment on Reddit alleges that the drivers' meeting before the previous day's truck race confirmed that the move was legal on the last lap. What isn't alleged is this quote from NASCAR spokesman Owen Kearns after the race, in which he said Benson wasn't penalized because if you can see the checkered flag on the last lap, anything goes. It doesn't matter. Smith gets disqualified for passing below the yellow line despite being forced down, reinforcing NASCAR's apparent previous stance. We can now update our definition to read, no driver may go below the yellow line to advance their position. It doesn't matter if you're forced below the line. This is now much more apparent. It also doesn't matter if you net lose positions on track, only if you pass a car while below the line. No exceptions, not even on the last lap. This reinforcement will have consequences. The next time the Cup Series race is here, Brad Keselowski will stand his ground and send Carl Edwards into the catch fence, kickstarting one of the fiercest rivalries in recent NASCAR history. As you can see, NASCAR repainted the now double yellow line to better reflect two-lane highways, where a double yellow line means no passing is allowed. After this, NASCAR made it as clear as they possibly could that you won't be penalized anymore if you get forced below the line. In 2010, Kyle Busch passed Eric Almirola on the final lap, and Almirola believes Busch went below the yellow line.
Maybe you should look at that. It looked like he went below the yellow line right there too. He's below the yellow line. You can see it right there.
But from looking at the tape, Kyle was definitely ahead before he crossed it, so this is a legal move. What decisively wasn't a legal move was Denny Hamlin's pass on the final lap of the 2011 Bud Shootout. Ryan Newman gave him a full lane of room, and Hamlin still chose to cross the line to make the pass. Through the 2010s, yellow line talk would quiet down as there wasn't any high-profile race-altering incident through a good chunk of the decade. At this point, our definition looks something like this. No driver may go below the yellow line to advance their position at any point in the race, including the last lap. It doesn't matter if you net lose positions on track, only if you pass a car below the line. The only exception is if you are forced below the yellow line by another car. In 2018, Justin Haley makes a similar move to Hamlin. He has plenty of room, but goes just far enough below the line that NASCAR black flags him. But he may have been ahead of the field by the time he went below it. This is close enough that I think it's a toss-up and it doesn't affect our definition. A year later, our definition will be seismically altered. Johnny Sauter is leading the truck field into the tri-oval in the final lap at Talladega. As he drifts up the track, Riley Herbst dives low. Sauter tries to block despite not being clear, and Herbst doesn't hold his ground. He gets pushed below the line, his momentum is gone, and Sauter holds off Spencer Boyd to take the checkered flag.
Johnny Sauter is not going to win the race. It's the 20 of Spencer Boyd.
This has been a rule for quite some time, but many people didn't expect it to be enforced this way, since it had never occurred in such a pivotal moment of a race before. Not only was Herbst not penalized, which should be obvious since he didn't pass anyone, but Johnny Sauter was penalized, giving the win to Spencer Boyd. Alright. No driver may go below the yellow line to advance their position at any point in the race, including the last lap. It doesn't matter if you net lose positions on track, only if you pass a car well below the line. The only exception is if you are forced below the line by another car. In this case, the driver that forces you below will be penalized. The next day in the Cup race, Ryan Newman may have shoved Ryan Blaney below the line, but he wasn't penalized. I guess Blaney wasn't far enough down for it to matter. 2020 brings the final large yellow line controversy to date. In turn 4, Matt DiBenedetto forces William Byron below the line, and Denny Hamlin takes advantage by going all the way onto the apron. He passes DiBenedetto and Byron below the line and wins in a photo finish.
To the inside, side draft coming from the 24 car.
Denny Hamlin, William Byron, through the triangle, coming up to the stripe. And as they go across the stripe, a photo finish!
Both DiBenedetto and Chris Buescher were penalized for forcing drivers below the line, and Hamlin wasn't penalized at all. You may think this is because NASCAR decided Buescher forced Hamlin below the line, but actually, Buescher was penalized for this move on Chase Elliott in the tri-oval. So if Hamlin wasn't forced below the line, why wasn't he penalized? He had plenty of time and space to get back up onto the racing surface, and instead he waited until just before he completed the pass. If we want to go back to 2003, he was certainly in the act of passing well below the line. From where I stand, Eric Jones should have won this race. After this incident, many current and former drivers called for the yellow line rule to be discontinued entirely, most notably Dale Earnhardt Jr.
Yeah, I got a great idea for everybody. How about we just get rid of the yellow line rule? Nobody really wants to see the races come down to these type of decisions, and I don't think it's going to crash more cars than we crashed today.
I agree that the yellow line rule probably doesn't prevent many accidents, but I still think the rule has its place in NASCAR for one simple but very important reason. At superspeedways, the apron should not be part of the racing surface. It's the last lap of the second 2021 Daytona Duel, and the late Gen 6 Superspeedway aero package is doing its usual thing. Bubba Wallace gets a huge run on Martin Truex Jr., and just before he makes the move, the field passes a nearly stationary Derek Cope. Just after this, Wallace and Busch put two wheels on the line passing Truex. If the rule hadn't been in place and they went to the apron to make this pass a little bit earlier, there could have been a style of wreck that we haven't seen since the 2014 Rolex 24.
Oh, and a problem.
Oh my gosh!
Perhaps a fair compromise would be to return to the ruling from 2007, where anything goes when inside of the checkered. Maybe they could have it be wherever the flagman physically waves the checkered flag, or maybe they could paint some anarchy line somewhere in the tri-oval. It wouldn't prevent the controversy from 2020 since they were way back in turn 4, but I feel that was just a unique bungling of the rules by NASCAR. Speaking of rules, let's wrap things up by amending our definition one final time. No driver may go below the yellow line to advance their position at any point in the race, including the last lap. It doesn't matter if you net lose positions on track, only if you pass a car well below the line. The only exception is if you're forced below the yellow line by another car. In this case, the driver that forces you below will be penalized. The driver forcing you below may be penalized even if you don't advance your position. These rules are fully at the discretion of NASCAR officials and may be ignored or changed at any moment without warning. Now, isn't that such a fitting rule definition for NASCAR?